Imagine a breathtaking scenario. At the height of a biblical conflict, an angel descends from the heavens with a divine mission to save the kingdom of Judah. This is not just any confrontation, but a battle that threatened to destroy everything God's people had built. Ahead of him, 185,000 fierce and unbeatable Assyrian soldiers marched toward victory. With an immense army and an uncontrollable thirst for power, King Hezekiah, desperate, calls out to God, and the divine response comes through this celestial angel, who prepares to face the horde of invaders. This story is not just about war. It's about faith, divine protection, and the power of the impossible. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in this epic battle will surprise you and leave you with a new perspective on God's power and His promises. It all begins in the reign of Hezekiah in the ancient kingdom of Judah, a turbulent time but full of opportunities for a great new beginning. Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, ascended to the throne at just 25 years old, in an era marked by great political and spiritual instability. His reign, which lasted approximately 29 years, would be immortalized by the courage and wisdom with which he led the people of Judah, a kingdom that by then was deeply estranged from the principles that had supported their ancestors. At that time, the kingdom of Judah was immersed in the darkness of idolatry, a nation that had turned away from the one true God. The people had been seduced by pagan practices and the spiritual corruption promoted by the reign of his father Ahaz, a king who ruled with an iron fist and favored foreign gods. He had closed the temples of worship to God and erected altars to idols in every corner of Judah, leading the people to spiritual ruin. But Hezekiah, unlike his father, was a man of faith. From the beginning of his reign, he committed himself to restoring worship to the one true God. And with unparalleled courage, he began a great process of religious reforms. He knew it would be a hard task, because the people were accustomed to idols, and pagan practices were deeply rooted in society. However, Hezekiah did not hesitate to face this challenge, motivated by a burning desire to see the kingdom of Judah return to true worship. Hezekiah then took a bold and symbolic action. He called the priests and Levites and ordered them to cleanse the temple of Jerusalem, removing the idols, altars, and everything that had been placed there by his predecessors to worship foreign gods. The temple, which was the spiritual heart of Jerusalem and the entire kingdom, had become dirty and profaned. And Hezekiah knew that the purity of the temple was essential for restoring the relationship between the people and God. The task was monumental, but the priests and Levites worked tirelessly to purify the place until the temple was finally clean and ready to receive true worship. With the temple restored, Hezekiah called the people of Judah to a great Passover celebration, an event not seen since the days of Solomon. Thousands of sacrifices were offered, and the covenant between God and the people of Judah was renewed. This moment of spiritual renewal was not just a religious ceremony. It was a powerful symbol of a return to true faith and a restored relationship with God. The people were united once again, now with a common purpose: to worship the God of Israel and abandon the idolatry that had enslaved them for so long. This event, the purification of the temple and the renewal of the covenant, marked a before and after in the history of Judah. It was the beginning of a new spiritual era, and the people began to experience true transformation, both in worship and in social behavior. The idolatry that had permeated every aspect of Judah's life began to be purged, and the nation found itself united around true faith. But behind this great reform, there was a distant memory, a reminder of the power of obedience to God and divine healing. An ancient story, dating back to the time of the Exodus, when the people of Israel, in their desperation in the desert, were bitten by venomous snakes. Crying out for help, God instructed Moses to lift a bronze serpent on a pole. The promise was clear: all who looked at the serpent would be healed. This act of faith became a symbol of healing, and God revealed, through this simple action, the power of obedience even in the most desperate moments. The bronze serpent not only healed physically, but also served as a reminder that to experience God's mercy and power, it was necessary to trust fully in His word, even when the situation seemed hopeless. Hezekiah, well aware of this story, understood that the people of Judah also needed to look beyond what they could see with human eyes. The true symbol of healing and restoration was in looking to God and trusting in Him, just as their ancestors had done in the desert. The bronze serpent, like the reforms and purification of the temple, represented a call to repentance, to return to trusting the Lord, and to experience true healing for the soul. And so, with renewed faith and an unwavering commitment to truth, the kingdom of Judah, under the leadership of Hezekiah, took great strides to restore worship to the one true God, leaving behind the idolatry that had dominated the nation for so long. The people, now more united and strengthened by faith, witnessed God act powerfully in their history, transforming what seemed to be an end into a new beginning of hope and obedience. Over time, like many other sacred relics and symbols, the bronze serpent, known as Nehushtan, came to be worshipped by the Israelites incorrectly. Instead of reminding the people of God's work and mercy, it became an object of worship, something that distorted true worship. The people, instead of recognizing the serpent as a means of healing given by God, began to attribute its own power to it, offering incense and performing rituals around it. Upon learning of this practice, Hezekiah, with his heart focused on purifying the faith of his people, made a radical decision. According to 2 Kings 18:4, he ordered the destruction of the bronze serpent. The king not only destroyed the serpent, but also tore down the altars and idol poles that spread across the kingdom, reaffirming his commitment to monotheism and the exclusive worship of God. He knew that, to restore true faith, it would be necessary to remove all obstacles to the purity of worship. This action was not merely a religious correction, but also a statement that worship of God could not be mediated by objects or symbols. By destroying the serpent, Hezekiah reminded the people of Judah that God, and only He, was worthy of worship. He did this so that the people would not lose themselves in the worship of relics, but return sincerely to the one true God. The destruction of the bronze serpent was one of the most emblematic moments of Hezekiah's reign, representing not only the fight against idolatry, but also the desire to purify worship and restore the people's relationship with God. In this context, Hezekiah became an example of courageous and faithful leadership, determined to lead his people back to fidelity to God, no matter the difficulties he might face. In addition to the religious reforms that marked his reign, Hezekiah also stood out for his courage and leadership during times of great political and military tension. He faced one of the greatest challenges of his era, the imminent threat of the Assyrian Empire. During Hezekiah's reign, the kingdom of Judah found itself under increasing pressure from Assyria, a military powerhouse led by the feared king Sennacherib. The relationship between Hezekiah and Sennacherib is marked by a series of dramatic and conflicting events, recorded both in the Bible and in historical sources of the time. Sennacherib ruled Assyria from 705 to 681 BC, during which his empire was at the height of its expansion. Assyria, known for its unbeatable military strength, with disciplined and well-equipped armies, had been conquering neighboring lands with extreme effectiveness. Their raids throughout the Middle East brought fear and destruction, and the kingdom of Judah was not immune to this threat. At the start of the conflict, Hezekiah tried a diplomatic approach. Aware of the approaching Assyrian forces, he chose to negotiate with Sennacherib, offering a tribute in exchange for peace and the preservation of Jerusalem. However, Sennacherib's response was relentless. Even in the face of Hezekiah's offer, the Assyrian king advanced, and in a move of pure show of force, he conquered all the fortified cities of Judah, leaving Jerusalem as the last bastion of resistance. Desperate, Hezekiah sent a message to Sennacherib, offering to pay the demanded tribute. He said, "I have sinned. Leave me alone. I will do all that you impose on me." However, Sennacherib was not satisfied with these terms, and, determined to completely subjugate Judah, ignored Hezekiah's surrender and proceeded with his plans for invasion. Jerusalem was then besieged, and the city found itself at the mercy of one of the most powerful forces of the ancient world. In a moment of utter anguish, Hezekiah received a letter from Sennacherib filled with threats not only to the city, but also to the God of Israel himself. The Assyrian king mocked the Lord, challenging the divinity, and proclaiming the inevitability of Jerusalem's destruction. Upon reading these words, Hezekiah felt completely overwhelmed by the situation, and in an act of despair, tore his clothes, a common gesture in his culture as a sign of mourning and distress. It was in this moment of affliction that Hezekiah, seeking comfort and guidance, ascended to the temple of God. There, he spread the letter before the Lord, crying out for divine intervention. He knew that his only hope was in the mercy and power of God. Hezekiah sought the guidance of the prophet Isaiah, God's messenger, to understand how he should act in the face of such a great threat. Under God's direction, Isaiah brought a message of hope and confidence. The prophet assured Hezekiah that despite the threat from Sennacherib, God had heard the insults and blasphemies of the Assyrian king. In a clear and powerful prophecy, Isaiah said, "Do not be afraid of the words you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. I will bring you back by the same route you came." God was assuring Hezekiah that the destruction of Jerusalem would not happen, and that the Assyrian army would be defeated. Isaiah then proclaimed divine protection over Jerusalem, affirming that God would intervene directly to save the city. He prophesied that, despite Sennacherib's arrogance, he would not be able to conquer Jerusalem. God himself, in his sovereignty, would guarantee the safety of his city, and the Assyrian army would be defeated. This moment of great tension was thus transformed by Hezekiah's faith and Isaiah's word, which brought comfort and renewed hope to the king and the people of Judah. They were about to experience a divine intervention that would be marked in history as an example of God's power in defending his own against the most fearsome enemies. Hezekiah had to wait, but the trust in the Lord and faithfulness to his word would be rewarded in an extraordinary way. For what followed would be one of the most miraculous and remarkable victories in the history of Judah. In his time of great anguish and uncertainty, Isaiah not only brought a message of comfort, but also reminded the king of the promises God had made to David, assuring him of Jerusalem's protection and the continuation of the Davidic line. Isaiah's message emphasized that despite Sennacherib's threat, Jerusalem would be saved because of God's unconditional love for David and the divine covenant he had made with the house of David. To further strengthen Hezekiah's and the people's faith, Isaiah offered an extraordinary sign, a miracle to prove that the prophet's words were true. He announced that as a sign of divine intervention, the shadow on the sundial of Ahaz would go back 10 degrees. The meaning of this act was not just symbolic, but also a testimony to God's power and authority over nature and the events unfolding. As recorded in the Bible, this sign indeed occurred, and the shadow moved back, visibly and powerfully demonstrating the truth of God's promise. Isaiah's word brought not only relief, but also a renewal of hope to the people of Judah, who were on the brink of despair. Hezekiah, with his heart full of faith, then turned to the Lord in prayer. He pleaded with the God of Israel to hear his prayer and intervene to protect Jerusalem. The king appealed to God that his intervention not only be a matter of saving the city, but also a demonstration of his power before the kingdoms of the earth, so that all would know that the Lord was indeed the supreme God. Hezekiah placed his full trust in God, knowing that only he could save the city from certain doom.
Hezekiah's prayer, along with the people's faith, did not go unnoticed. God answered supernaturally, as recorded in 2 Kings 19:35. That night, the angel of the Lord descended upon the Assyrian camp and struck down 185,000 soldiers. When the Israelites arose the next morning, they found the Assyrian camp completely deserted, with the bodies of thousands of soldiers scattered everywhere. The scale of the destruction was so great that the Assyrian army was utterly defeated without a single Judean sword being raised. The Bible does not go into detail about how exactly this miracle occurred, but the message is clear. The divine intervention was direct and powerful, a supernatural act that ensured the protection of Jerusalem and its people. This episode is a testament to God's power in protecting His own, even in the face of the greatest threats and difficulties. For the people of Judah, the victory was a clear sign of God's faithfulness to His promises and the importance of unwavering faith and trust in Him in times of crisis. The impact of this intervention was profound, not only for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, but also for Judah's enemies. King Sennacherib, who had approached the city with certainty of victory, was forced to abandon his siege and return to his homeland. Assyrian historical records confirm that after the defeat, Sennacherib managed to escape, but he was deeply humiliated by this failure in his military campaign. Although he survived and continued to rule Assyria for some time, the king was never the same. His reputation ruined by his defeat before the God of Israel. Although the account of Sennacherib's death is not found in the Bible, it is widely documented in Assyrian records. According to these historical sources, the Assyrian king was assassinated by his own son Esarhaddon in 681 BC. The assassination occurred under mysterious circumstances, but many historians believe it was motivated by internal disputes within the Assyrian royal family, possibly a struggle for power. Whatever the reason, Sennacherib's death was violent and tragic, an unexpected end for a king who at the height of his power was miraculously defeated by a God who defended his city and his people. This event not only marked the history of Judah, but also became etched as a reminder to all nations that no human power, no matter how strong, can resist God's power when He decides to intervene. The people of Jerusalem, therefore, not only saw their city saved, but but also witnessed God's supreme power in action, solidifying their faith and reaffirming their commitment to the God who always keeps his promises.
The defeat of the Assyrian army, which was considered virtually invincible, is one of the most impressive moments in biblical history. This event clearly demonstrates how human arrogance and overconfidence in military force can be surprisingly thwarted by divine actions. God's intervention on behalf of Jerusalem teaches us a powerful lesson. Even when circumstances seem impossible, when the situation seems hopeless, God has the power to change the course of events and ensure victory for his people. Furthermore, this episode highlights the importance of humility before God. Pride and self-sufficiency can lead us to failure, but trust in God and his promises is the true strength that sustains and protects. After this great victory, Hezekiah not only continued to worship and serve the God of Israel, but also continued promoting religious reforms in the kingdom. His commitment to the purity of worship to God was unwavering. He also focused on strengthening the city of Jerusalem, aware that although he had experienced a miraculous divine intervention, the kingdom needed to be prepared for any potential future threat. Therefore, Hezekiah ordered the construction of a new outer wall, known as the Siloam Wall, as a reinforcement of the city's defenses. This infrastructure expansion aimed to ensure that Jerusalem was protected from invaders and ready to withstand future difficult times. However, Hezekiah's reign was not without challenges. The Bible also records that at one point, the king faced a severe illness that brought him to the brink of death. This was a moment of great distress, but as always, Hezekiah demonstrated deep faith. He pleaded with the Lord to hear him and grant him more time to live. God's response was marvelous. He heard his prayers, healed him, and granted him 15 more years of life. This miracle is recorded in the book of Isaiah, chapter 38, as further proof of God's power and his mercy toward those who sincerely seek him. After a reign of about 29 years, Hezekiah passed away around 686 BC. His son Manasseh succeeded him on the throne. However, unlike Hezekiah, Manasseh was a king who departed from the principles of pure worship and led Judah back to idolatry, undoing his father's reforms. The transition between Hezekiah and Manasseh marked a period of spiritual decline for the kingdom of Judah, with idolatry gaining strength once again, which would later have devastating consequences for the kingdom. This story of Hezekiah is rich in lessons of faith, courage, and trust in God. It teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming threats and insurmountable challenges, God can intervene and accomplish the impossible. It also reminds us of the importance of maintaining our humility before God and always trusting in his guidance. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and click on one of the videos that will appear to continue watching our content. Hugs and God bless. See you soon.